Okay, I'm gonna talk about payroll tax today. Who actually pays payroll tax? This is a very interesting question. And I read this article that talked about payroll tax and who bears the burden of payroll tax, and it was really interesting. So I want to talk about this. Let's start with the definition. Payroll tax is a tax on employees' wages and salaries, primarily used to fund social insurance programs like Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment insurance. So you pay those taxes. Okay, you pay those taxes called payroll tax. So when something happen, let's say you get older, you can use Medicare. You can go to hospital with cheaper price. You can use Social Security when something happens, or when you get unemployed. Unfortunately, you can get unemployment compensation from the government. So I believe it is from the government. Yeah, so that's how it works, and it's not only unique to the United States of America. A lot of other countries have this. It's an insurance system. It's a public insurance system, and it is. But we still call this taxes because it is mandatory to pay for this, and government do collect this from people. And these taxes are typically split between employers and workers. Okay, so nominally by law, it is not only workers who pay for this. Employers also have to bear also have to pay payroll tax that workers would need to pay. So in the U.S., it is a flat tax rate, totaling 15.3%. Okay, so for most of the people, uh, whether you're poor or in middle class, you pay 15.3% of your income as payroll tax. Uh, there is cap, so if you earn more than certain amount of income, then the additional income that you gain after that cap would not be taxed. Okay, payroll tax wouldn't be imposed to the additional income that you earn after a certain amount of level defined by the government. So rich people pay less tax rate in terms of payroll tax. Okay, but that's not the main topic here. We just need to know that 15.3% of the income needs to go to the government. However, by law, employers pay 7.65% and withhold the other 7.65% from employees' pay. Okay, so nominally or legally, what it says is that if you earn $100, uh, you don't pay 15. You don't pay as a worker labor 15.3% of 100%. Sorry, $100 income, but you only pay 7.65%. Why is it possible? Because the other 7.65% is paid by the employers, the firms, the boss, or the businesses. So, and that's the premise that we need to know. However, what this article really talked about is why is well, first of all, it pointed out the fact or reality that laborers are the one who are bearing more burden than firms. It's not split into half. It's not actually 7.65%. It's not 50% of the payroll tax that is actually putting that being a burden on laborers. Majority or even 90% or vast majority, almost entirety of the payroll tax is actually paid by the laborers effectively. So that's what this article said, and a lot of economists agree with that. So, and people would wonder why is that the case? Why is labor effectively bearing more burden than firms? It is because firms, as a result of payroll tax, okay, firms just reduce the wages and salaries that they pay to those workers, so they can minimize the burden of payroll tax. That's what they do. They just cut the wages instead. Okay, so in this case, uh, laborers are not only bearing the actual cost of payroll tax, but they also have to bear the impact of wage cut, right? That's what happens. So if government increase payroll tax or start imposing payroll tax, uh, firms just decide to cut wages. Therefore, most of the 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 impact, okay, the reduction in income, reduction in the benefit that people can get. In terms of that, workers are bearing most of it. And it would be fair that people would ask, why can firms just reduce wages and salaries like this? Why can't they just do that? They can do that, and what it can be explained by elasticity. Okay, elasticity is a very important concept. This is because of inelasticity of labor supply. When laborers are so insensitive to wages they gain, firms just cut wages, but laborers will still keep working. That's why. And let's go back to what elasticity means, right? Elasticity is about responsiveness. Okay, how responsive they are, how responsive demanders or suppliers are. If we have this important concept, which is price elasticity of demand. Okay, it is percentage change in quantity demanded, divided by or over a percentage change in price. Okay, as a result of price change, how much would demanders respond? Okay, how much quantity, in terms of percentage, they would cut as a result of price. We all know that if price increase, demanders will demand less quantity will be demanded. But it, elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand kind of measures quantify uh, that responsiveness. Same for elasticity, price elasticity of supply. As a result of price increase, how much quantity supplied would increase, right? By how much would quantity supplied increase? So it's about responsiveness, and we can apply this to labor market too. Okay, and who's demanders in labor market? We all know this. Demanders in labor market is firms. Firms are the one who want labors, and who's the suppliers of labors? It is household. Household supply labors, and they get wages, which is a price of labors. So the best idea is actually to draw this. Okay, so it will be very clear. So we draw this. Oops, my pen is not working perfectly. Okay. Okay, let me try this. So this is, oops. Okay, my pen is probably not church enough, but it's fine. Demand and supply, okay? And this is household, and this is firms. And we have wages, which is price of labor. We can be salaries, and we have quantity of labors. And this is equilibrium. Wages and quantity. And what happens is that supply can shrink because of this, right? From the perspective of laborers, they are kind of well, we can actually do both ways. I'm gonna explain both of them. So supply curve can shift to the left. Supply decreases because from the perspective of laborers, it will be more costly to work because they have to pay those taxes, right? This is what can happen. Or it can also be demand. We can also think about this from the perspective of demand side. Demand shrinks uh, because the benefit that firms can get from additional labor would be less high. Okay, it's not going to be as high. It's going to be lower than before because remember, demand is about marginal benefit. Well, would marginal benefit change as a result of payroll tax? Yes, because firms have to pay. Have to submit payroll tax, hand in payroll tax to the government as they hire those employees. So therefore, there's going to be less benefits. So demand can shift down or shift to the left. However, this is not completely accurate, as I said, because elasticity is very different, right? Because if you only look at this model, we can actually realize that the burden is actually split into half, because this is the payroll tax, right? This is how much payroll tax the firms is needs to hand in, and oops, yeah, and the new, so actually will be here. This is new quantity, and this is this is okay. How much payroll tax that firms need to hand in, right? And then the previous wages was here. So because firms demand less laborers because it's really costly to hire people, there's gonna be surplus of labor, okay? Because wages still set at this point. And as a react because wage hasn't changed, the quantity supplied hasn't changed. Okay, quantity supplied, the labor supplied by the households hasn't changed, the number of them hasn't changed, and the quantity demanded, labor quantity demanded by firms has decreased as a result of payroll tax. There, this way there's surplus, and when there's surplus in a competitive market, that this is gonna be it's gonna be there's gonna be downward pressure on price, which is wages. So the wages goes down until it reaches another equilibrium. So this would be new wages, wage two. And this decline in wages, okay, is obviously painful for laborers. However, uh, firms are also bearing this much cost, okay? Why? Because they're paying this much payroll tax. However, they were able to decrease laborers' uh, wages by this. So they're actually splitting the cost. However, this is only the case when supply and demand has similar elasticity. But elasticity is different. This article that I introduced actually stated that elasticity of supply is very, very low. It's very inelastic when it comes to labor market. And I'm going to explain why. So this is household, and the demand would look like this. This is firms. And household and wages or salaries and quantity. And the reason for this is that laborers are desperate about working. Okay, so just because there is decrease in wages, they wouldn't be like, oh, okay, now we're not motivated anymore. We're gonna stay at home. We're not gonna provide our labor. Household won't say that. Laborers need to work. Okay, it's partly because they need that to survive. It's very scary to lose jobs. It's really scary to withdraw yourself from job markets and just stay at home and watch TVs every day. That's just really, really tough choice, especially if you're healthy, young members of the society. So a lot of workers are desperate in keeping their jobs and making sure they keep working, even though wages may be lower than they want. Okay, or it may be not as high as they want, or it may be decreased by firms. They still work. Okay, they still continue to work, and it's also partly because of identity issues, right? People don't only work to get money. People work to feel like they're contributing to the society. That's why they feel useless when they get fired by firms. So for those reasons, they're really desperate in making sure that they work no matter how much income they can earn. Okay, so that's why supply curve look like this. Okay, wage might change from here to here, or okay, let's just wage cut happens from here to here. The quantity of labor supplied by household wouldn't change as much, right? Because it's inelastic. They're not responsive to the price, responsive to the wages at all. So this is what happens. On the other hand, firms not really. They're not necessarily inelastic, and they have substitutes. If wages, if labors get expensive, maybe they may just try to adapt new technology and things like that, and they're not going to have like an identity crisis or survival issues just because uh, they they hire less laborers. Okay, but from the perspective of individual household, they're gonna have those issues when you do not take the job, when you withdraw yourself from the job market just because wages get a bit lower than before. Okay, they don't do that. But however, firms are actually quite responsive to the wage difference. If wage is too high, maybe they're like, okay, maybe we don't want to hire these too many people. We're just gonna adapt this new technology, or maybe we can just find a way to do it more efficiently. Firms are more flexible. Firms are more open to not hiring people. Right? That's the reality for average. Well, what's happening in the economy, and we're gonna draw the effect of uh, payroll tax here. So demand by firms will shrink because of the payroll tax, because of the significant decline in the benefit that they can get by hiring each additional labor, because they have to pay those payroll tax. Remember, firms are the one who are submitting, okay, doing the legal process of handing in the taxes, payroll taxes to the government. Okay, laborers don't do the process. Firms do all that, and laborers just receive what's left. So it's a demand side shock. Okay, it's demand shock. So we'll have this, and then what happens is that the wage, original competitive wage, was here, right? But now they're gonna have again surplus of labor. Okay, because firms hire less people. Firms don't want to hire people because of the payroll tax that they have to submit. So, but laborers keep working, or keep at least try to keep looking for jobs. So there's going to be surplus, a lot of unemployment, and when there are a lot of surplus of products, that's going to put downward pressure on wages. So wages goes down. However, because of the price elasticity, wage inelasticity of supply, the new competitive uh, wage will be way down here. Okay, this is new wages, and the tax uh, that firms have to be paying is actually this much, but they were able to cut wages quite significantly. Therefore, this is how much, this is the burden that laborers are bearing, and this is the burden that farms are bearing. So this is the reality. This is why. If I hope this intuitively makes sense. To make it more, to put it more simply, uh, because firms have to hand in those payroll tax. When payroll tax is imposed, firms just hire way less people. So there are a lot of laborers left out there who are looking for jobs, and firms take advantage of it. Firms just cut the wages, saying to these laborers, like, I know you want to work. I know you want to desperately work, no matter how low the wages may be, because you don't wanna have identity crisis. You don't wanna worry your family. You wanna make sure you're having at least some level of income, no matter how low that is. And firms take advantage of that, so they cut wages quite significantly. Okay, and then they still submit payroll tax. However, because of the sharp decline in the wages, laborers are the one who are um, suffering from payroll tax. Okay, this is why 90% or more than that, or almost entirety, almost 100% of the payroll tax is effectively paid by the laborers. Okay, I'm gonna repeat it again. I'm gonna repeat this again. So because firms need to pay payroll tax, because they need to hand in payroll tax to the government, they just hire less people. Okay, they just hire less people because economic reasoning. It just makes more sense. And then there are a lot of laborers out there who are desperately looking for jobs, who are saying, I really need jobs like tomorrow or today, right now, before I'm gonna have identity crisis, or I'm gonna worry my parents or family, kids, wives or husband, things like that. And then firms take advantage of it. Firms are more flexible. Firms are like, maybe we have some other options. We don't need to hire you. We can put some technologies. They say that, but labor's like, please let me work. So okay, so firms can say like, okay, we're gonna cut wages instead, and this is what happens. So that's the reality. Workers are willing to work no matter how much disposable wages and salary they need. They need wages to sustain their lives. And I would say identity issues too, Very, very important. Business may be less desperate about losing workers. They have more substitutes and may replace workers. Maybe with technology. Or they could change their business models so they need less workers. Something like, they have more flexibility. And yeah, an important thing to note is we actually do have this formula that numerically quantifies the burden, what percentage of the tax is actually imposed on demanders and suppliers. Burden of tax on demanders, or price elasticity of supply, divided by price elasticity of supply plus price elasticity of demand. For burden, numerator will have PED instead, price elasticity of demand instead of PES. It makes sense, right? It should intuitively make sense. Price elasticity of supply gets higher, burdens on demanders will be higher too, because price elasticity kind of um, shows flexibility. Okay, it's very responsive. If price changes, they're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna buy different things. That's the responsiveness. So if the price elasticity of supply is high, if they're really flexible, then the non-flexible one would bear the burden, which is demanders in this case. However, in this labor example, this would be the case. Burden of tax on supply. Well, in for this example, I would say price elasticity is very low. Flexibility is very low. That's why burden on tax, burden of tax on demanders is minimum, which is uh, payroll tax burden that employers actually bear, which is very very minimum. An important takeaway from this entire lesson is that who nominally pays taxes and who actually bears the burden could be really really different. Okay, it could be same sometimes, but it is different. It can be different. Um, this is the best example because nominally firms are paying half of the payroll tax, and employees are paying the other half. Okay, that's what law says, and nominally that is what's happening. However, because firms cut the wages and salaries as a response to those payroll tax, um, employees are the one who are actually bearing the pain from it. Okay, its actual budgetary impact is way larger than what you think you are paying. Uh, this doesn't only apply for payroll tax; it applies for almost any tax. And this applies. And the best example is indirect tax. Okay, the best indirect tax includes sales tax and tariffs. Those who buy or supply, no matter what they can gain, meaning that having low elasticity or having high inelasticity can gain would be the one who bears the majority of the burden. Okay, the less flexible one are the one who bears the burden of taxes. Same as sales tax. Okay, I can actually draw this to make sure we fully understand this. Let me just delete this quickly. Okay, perfect. So sales tax, right? Let's think about the let's think about the demand that is very, very inelastic, okay? Which is look like this. For any products, let's say medicine that you need. Medicine, we don't have that many substitutes, and medicine you need that to survive. So you desperately need it, no matter what price that is, okay? If you really need that medicine, you're gonna buy it, whether if it's $10 or $20, right? So very uh, inelastic demand. That's why it's very vertical. Vertical means that price changes would not result in much quantity change. That's what inelastic means. And we have just normal supply. And in this case, less flexible ones are the buyers, obviously, right? So when there's indirect tax imposed by the government, um, nominally who pays those indirect tax, it's not consumers. Nominally it is farms who pay all the sales tax. Okay, they calculate the revenue, and they find a percentage, and they just submit it to the government. That's what firms do. So nominally firms are bearing 100% of the cost of the sales tax for this medicine. However, uh, competitive price was here, right? Okay. Because demanders need no matter what. When there is shortage. Okay, in this case it's shortage. When there's shortage of medicine because farms produce much less than before, right? Farms gonna be like, okay, this is we have to pay those taxes just by selling those medicines, so we're actually gonna sell less than before. And then there's gonna be shortage, and when there's shortage, the price will always go up. Okay, in the competitive market, and when the price goes up, because consumers are so desperate in buying it, firms gonna be like, or the shops, retails, or the medicine shops gonna be like, okay, we're gonna spike our medicine price to solve the shortage issues. But it should be fine for you because you as consumers gonna buy it anyways. So as a result, this will be the price hike, which will be very high, and the actual indirect tax is this line, right? Okay. So this is the burden that firms are paying, and this is the burden imposed on consumers. So same, right? If it's well, we can do this in the opposite way. Like it's vice versa. I would say like elastic demand. Okay, very elastic demand, very responsive. Little price change would uh, result. Well, let's say little price increase would result in significant decrease in quantity demanded, quantity sold. That is elastic demand. It's for the good that is maybe luxury or the goods or services that kind of like is a huge that kind of has a large share of the budget like cars or houses, or something that is not urgently necessary, or something that has a lot of substitutes. That is elastic. That those products tend to have it elastic demand, and we have supply. And supply um, increase because of the sales tax. Let's say this is, I don't know, it can be anything. Hmm, I don't know. Let's say hamburgers. Okay, we don't need hamburgers. Okay, let's say McDonald's. McDonald's has a lot of substitutes. So if government specifically impose taxes on McDonald's, which is unrealistic, uh, the competitive price was here. And this will be the quantity demanded. However, the supply shrinks significantly because McDonald's makes less hamburgers when they're taxed so much. So there's going to be shortage issues too. And when there's shortage issues, who has more advantage? In the shortage issues, those with high elasticity have advantage. McDonald buyers are gonna be like, we have a lot of stuff, so we can go to Moss Burgers, we can go to Dunkin' Donuts, we have so many sandwich and hamburger shops out there. We don't even need to buy you if it's that expensive. That's what buyers would say, and firms are gonna be like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry, we're not gonna spike our price that much to solve this shortage issues. We're only gonna increase just by just a bit. Okay, in this case, um, new price would be here, which is very little change. So consumers obviously do not bear the cost of that. Consumers don't care at all. Well, it's not like they don't. It's like they're gonna see hamburgers price going up just by a bit, very small percentage increase. However, the firms need to be paying this much. Okay, this much sales tax. As a result, this will be the consumer's burden, and this will be supplier's burden. Okay, so the flexible one, those who are like, okay, we can supply or not supply, or those people who are flexibly saying like, oh, we can buy or not buy because we have so many substitutes, or it's no origin or something. Those flexible, the one who can get advantage when there's shortage or surplus. And when there's shortage and surplus, those with less flexibility, meaning that high in elasticity, those who desperately need to supply, or those who desperately need to buy. Okay, those are the one who have to bear higher cost or higher burden of taxes. Okay, so don't get deceived by like this nominal things like, oh, it's split into half, so it's fair, things like that. You have to be critical. What's the elasticity of demanders and suppliers? It's applicable for any taxes. It's applicable for sales tax, tariffs, and payroll taxes. I wouldn't say all, but most of the taxes. So make sure you understand the difference between who bears the burden and who actually nominally pay, who legally pay, right? Well, actually, you should know this because you know this from sales tax. You're not paying sales tax, like nominally or legally. Legally, there's no legal obligation imposed on consumers regarding sales tax. It is on uh, seller side, like the shops who are legally required to hand in those taxes. So nominally, shops are bearing the cost, but we all know that it also puts burden on consumers. Same as that. Okay, so nominal and effective tax burden is completely different. We need to compare elasticity. Thank you so much.